Hey, everybody. Today for you, podcast number 50. Today's podcast is titled, Who Needs a Reminder? Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and of course, this is the Limitless Life Network podcast where we flesh out limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you were called to lead. And I want to take this time to welcome you and thank you for being a loyal listener and tuning in. And if you're not, somebody that's listened before, I appreciate you for tuning in for the very first time. And hope you enjoy the show today. I don't have my wife with me today, who I know is a absolute fan favorite, but she is enjoying time in the South with our son, our daughter-in-law, and our new grandson. But anyway, if you've been enjoying the content, be sure to like, follow, share. In other words, pass it on to people, spread the word. And if we're doing, a good job, give us a thumbs up or leave us a comment. I appreciate some of our listeners from out of state. We have some people listening in the state of Virginia. In Hopewell, Virginia. We have some people listening down in Florida, and some people on the West Coast. We have some people in the Midwest. So I appreciate the fact that this gets out all across the country and probably even around the world. I'm not sure about other countries yet who's picking up on the podcast, but either way, I appreciate it. We just want to spread the word of good news. Anyway, so let's get on with the show. Today's title, I was really trying to come up with a good name because I had a lot of different things. This is episode 50, so I'm thinking, episode 50, we want to do something, something really good. But I think most every episode is really good when we finally finish it. But it's entitled "Who Needs a Reminder?" And I guess the most relevant thing in my life right now and our family's life is our new grandson, Brooks, who was born 2 weeks ago. And over the weekend, I had the opportunity to travel to Atlanta, flew down on Friday with my wife and my daughter, Grace, and we got to meet a little baby Brooks for the first time. And he is super cute, as any grandparent could say about their grandchild, that because you just fall in love at first sight, and it's a wonderful thing. And it was equally great to see, our own son becoming a father and becoming a husband, and our daughter-in-law becoming a mother, taking on the role of wife and spouse, and it was just really cool to watch that growth taking place, because they really have no choice at this point, right? So anyway, everyone is doing great in their respective new roles, and they're just doing what we all do as first-time parents, and that is you learn on the fly. And there's some really good learning curves. I do have to say, as a caveat, my 12-year-old daughter was really impressed at how quickly I can change a diaper. And she's like, "Dad, how do you know how to change a diaper so well?" I'm like, "Well, I've done quite a few of them." Anyway, so let's get on with it. It's just, I can't say how grateful and how blessed I feel to see and to witness, a new family starting, and it happens every day. And but just being a part of my family, it's pretty neat to see. So different perspective as a grandparent, for sure. So point number one is this, and it really comes from this whole thing. We all start somewhere. We all have the beginning of our own story, and and I thought about this, and I thought, we can come from humble beginnings, or we can come from, the silver spoon in the mouth type of beginning. And they have their advantages and their disadvantages, but it becomes up to us. We can either make that start our crutch, or it can be our catapult. It can be our launch pad, or it could be what I term our haunch pad, where you just sit on your haunches. So, um, I don't, we don't get to choose our own beginnings. We don't get to choose our parents. And our parents, I will say that no matter what family you're born into, in most cases, they try to do the best that they can. But at some point, we all have a beginning, and then it's up to us and to find a way and to go somewhere with it. So, recognize your beginning, and don't be bitter about it. Don't be spiteful about it. Be grateful for it, and you'll move much further, much faster. So that's really point number one, is that, and it was really obvious to see that this new baby is just beginning. And here I am, more than halfway probably through my life. Who knows at this point? And yeah, it's my beginning is long gone. The beginning comes and then it goes very quickly. So point number two is the options are endless. And if you ever look into the eyes of a newborn baby, and this is one of the things that I saw with my own children, is that I just see so much innate potential. There's so much happening in a newborn baby, but there's so much potential for the future. We have no idea what that future is going to look like, whether it's going to be a short life, a long life, or a middle of the road life. You don't know what, trials and tribulations they'll face, but there's potential, and that potential can go literally in any direction. And that little child, that little human being, can make a huge impact or a tiny ripple, and it can change at any moment. So realize that no matter where you are in your own life, is that your options are still there. You may sometimes feel like you don't have any options, but think about a newborn baby. Yes, they don't have any responsibilities, they don't have any cares in the world, but they're entirely dependent upon their parents or their caregiver. Whereas you are no longer dependent usually on a parent or caregiver as you become an adult. So therefore, you have a lot of options still available, but oftentimes we pen ourselves in and no longer think we do have options. And so we kind of can get stuck in a routine. Yeah. So my wife, messaged me today, or talked to me on the phone, I should say. And she was talking about in Deuteronomy, where they talk about breaking camp. And we heard a really great sermon a while back from a pastor from Africa, who was talking about there's a time when it's no longer appropriate to stay in camp, and that you have to break camp, and that you will have a calling. We have a calling to do something different than what we're doing. And it's not always easy to break camp, because there's work involved in packing everything up. You're also leaving safety, you're leaving security, you're leaving comfort. But oftentimes, that's where you're going to march on to something bigger, greater, and maybe a higher calling. So that brings me to point number three, and that is something that I really see in my son and my daughter-in-law, is that they have been thrust into a situation of great responsibility. And taking on responsibility, I think, is extremely important for your own growth. Too often today, people are shirking responsibility. Too often, people today don't want to take on responsibility because they want somebody else to be responsible. But they want to have, I guess, the ability to complain, which you can complain all you want, but unless you are willing to take the responsibility, your vote really doesn't count very much. So if you really want to grow, if you really want to become a better human being, more responsibility will get you there faster. I will say that because it becomes a huge motivator when people are depending on you. And I'll tell you, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, when the game was on the line, Michael Jordan wanted the ball in his hands. He didn't care if he'd missed a bunch of shots in a row. When the game was on the line with no time left, he wanted to take the final shot. He wanted to be the one responsible for whether the game was won or lost because it made him great. It was one of the reasons that made him great was because he was willing to carry that responsibility, which I think is a great indicator. It's one of the many that are out there. So point number 4 is, do we have a motive? Have you ever listened to like on a movie or something where they're trying to solve a murder and they may have the suspect at the place of the murder at the time of the murder, and maybe they even have a weapon or something that they found in their presence. But the one thing they're always asking is, do we have a motive? Was there a reason why this person was going to commit this crime? Because that's what they need for this rock solid case. But the same thing for us is that our motive is super important. What is it? I mean, from the word motive comes the word motivate and motivation. But motive is your reason why. It's your driving force. It's what's really compelling to you. So if somebody wants to get in shape, if somebody wants to, give up alcohol and maybe they're an alcoholic and they want to stop drinking, what's your motivation? What's driving you? It's got to be something bigger than what's making you do what you're doing. It's got to be much more important. Otherwise, you won't change. So your motive is extremely important, and too many of us fail to see that. Now, in the case of great responsibility, a parent having to take care of a newborn baby, their motive is very clear and their objectives are very clear. And the work is still difficult, but they're going to carry it out because it's what they're called to do. They're charged with that responsibility. But for us, we don't always have something as clearly defined as that, and we need to get clear on our motive. So clarity of motive is extremely important. And that brings us to point number 5. So I feel like I'm tearing through these today, so which doesn't matter. But this one is great. The clock is ticking. So it has to do with time. And we started this off with everybody begins somewhere, right? We all have a beginning, and that's what really starts the clock. Unfortunately, we are bound by time in this world, and the clock is ticking. Now, if you couple the scarcity of time, in other words, time is evaporating for all of us, if you couple that with the clarity of what you were called to do while you're here, that becomes a very powerful combination. And the longer that I'm alive, I guess, the more I'm seeing this take place, but it's becoming less and less about me. And I see that, and you see that with somebody when they get married for the first time, right? Or hopefully the only time. But when they get married, everything prior to marriage, they had so much freedom. Everything was about them. And then all of a sudden, they have to share with their spouse. All of a sudden, it's no longer about just you. And my wife will attest to this, that I struggled with that initially when we were married. I would go off to do my own thing, and I wouldn't even mention to her. It wouldn't even cross my mind that she would wonder where I was and what I was doing. And this was long before cell phones, by the way. So, all of a sudden now you are it's not about you anymore. It wasn't about me. It was about me and my wife. It was a package deal. And then all of a sudden you throw in your first child. Now it's no longer about just the two of you. Now it's the three of you. And then you add children to the mix. And now all of a sudden it's becoming less and less about just you. And your role is constantly changing. And so the longer that I live, it is becoming less and less about me and more about him and the God that I serve. And I think that's extremely powerful because now you couple that with the scarcity of time, and there's only so much time to be, I guess, a child of God or somebody that's out there that's putting out a message of good news that, Jesus Christ was, here on this earth, and he came to basically teach us how to live. And he basically also came to save us from our own sinful nature. And I was reading today about before, long ago in Greece, there was a statue, I guess, that they created called Europa. And that statue was a statue of a white bull with a beautiful woman on top of it. And this statue actually was really a representation of the god Zeus. And Zeus turned himself into a bull, as the story goes. And he got this woman, he tricked her into getting on top of the bull and riding it away, where he goes off and seduces her. And that is really, I guess, a metaphor or an example of how very easily we can all be led away or led astray and brought down a dark path. And that's where, I think, Jesus Christ came here to teach us that there's another way, and that believing in him, that's the way to an eternal life in heaven. So I just want to pass that on to you. And if you want to learn more about that, you can certainly message me and reach out to us. There's all kinds of resources available for sure. But I want this to be a motivating thing for you to look at your life and do some reflection, because when you can strip away these limitations, these worldly things, what's really driving you? It's, not accumulating more things, but it's really about, helping more people really understand their true purpose in life. So anyway, that's all I have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Be sure to tune in each and every week to stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away your limitations. So thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week.